The quietest person in the room is often the one most capable of changing it. Silence is not proof of weakness. In the right mind, it is a method of seeing without being seen. Here is what nobody tells you. A dangerous mind does not need constant movement, explanation, or approval. It isn't passive. It is gathering information, measuring reactions, and refusing to spend attention where it produces nothing. The hidden mechanism is disciplined restraint, the ability to let others reveal themselves while you protect your own intentions. Machiavelli recognized that visible force is often less formidable than concealed judgment, because the person who waits can choose the moment instead of being dragged into another person's timing. Your silence can become that advantage when it is guided by awareness rather than fear. By the end, you will recognize 6 quiet habits that mark a watchful and formidable mind. You will see how to observe without absorbing pressure, withhold reaction without losing clarity, and move only when your action carries weight. Before you go further, write this in the comments: I let silence reveal patterns. This is not for the algorithm. It is a reminder that your quiet is not emptiness, and that nothing is lost when you are paying attention. Now, begin. Number 1. You let silence expose the room before you decide what the room means. Most people enter a conversation already preparing their answer. They listen for an opening, a weakness, or a chance to be seen as intelligent. Your attention moves differently. You allow the first impression to remain incomplete. You watch who speaks first, who interrupts, who changes tone when challenged, and who becomes generous only when an audience is present. The mechanism is simple but powerful. When people feel the need to fill every empty space, they reveal their priorities without realizing it. Silence creates a small pressure. Under that pressure, performance becomes harder to maintain. The person who was trying to appear confident may become impatient. The person seeking control may ask questions that expose their own concern. The person who has nothing to prove may remain steady. There is another layer to this. A room is not only made of statements, it is made of permission. Who is allowed to finish a thought? Whose interruption is treated as confidence, and whose interruption is treated as rudeness? Who receives warmth when they disagree, and who is quietly punished for doing the same? These details show you the actual structure beneath the stated one. You do not have to label the room immediately. You can enter as a witness before becoming a participant. Notice how your own attention changes when you stop trying to establish your position in the first few minutes. The urge to be understood begins to weaken. In its place comes a more useful question. What is this group rewarding, and what is it making expensive? Machiavelli understood that appearances are often managed for an audience, and that judgment improves when you study behavior across moments rather than accepting a single display. You do not need to accuse anyone. You do not need to announce what you have noticed. A pattern becomes more useful when it is observed quietly. So pay attention to what happens after you stop rescuing the conversation. Who rushes to explain? Who turns the silence against you? Who offers information that was never requested? And who remains comfortable without controlling the scene? You are not becoming distant. You are refusing to let noise decide what deserves your trust. The room speaks more clearly when you stop competing with it. Number 2. You delay your first reaction, especially when someone wants it immediately. A sudden accusation, a sarcastic remark, an urgent demand, or a compliment with an invisible condition can pull you into another person's timing. The instinct is to defend yourself, correct the record, or prove that you are unaffected. But the first reaction is often the easiest part of you to influence. The mind reacts quickly because it wants to remove uncertainty. It treats emotional discomfort as a problem that must be solved at once. That is why pressure works. If someone can make you angry, embarrassed, or afraid of being misunderstood, they can often make you act before you understand what is happening. It isn't strength to have no emotion. It is strength to create a space between emotion and action. You can feel the heat without handing it the steering wheel. You can hear the provocation without treating it as an instruction. That space can be very small. It may be the time required to read a message twice instead of answering once. It may be the decision to sleep before accepting an accusation as fact. It may be one calm sentence that needs consideration. The point is not to perform composure. The point is to interrupt the sequence in which another person's stimulus becomes your behavior. When you delay, separate the event from the story forming around it. Someone raised their voice. That is an event. They do not respect you. That is an interpretation. A message arrived late. That is an event. You are being deliberately ignored. That is an event. You are being deliberately ignored. That is a conclusion. Not every conclusion is wrong, but conclusions made under heat deserve inspection. Machiavelli's darker lesson was that a ruler who can be pulled by every insult will eventually be governed by whoever knows where to press. In ordinary life, the same principle protects you. The person who demands an instant answer may be seeking clarity, but may also be seeking leverage. You do not have to assume the worst. You do have to notice the timing. Ask yourself, what changes if you answer tomorrow? What information becomes visible if you do not defend yourself tonight? Is the issue truly urgent, or has urgency been placed around it to prevent thought? Watch your body when this happens. Notice the urge to send the message, explain the misunderstanding, or win the exchange. Then do less. Breathe. Ask for time. Say that the matter deserves a considered answer. Your silence is not surrender. It is a delay that returns choice to you. You are not refusing responsibility. You are refusing to confuse immediacy with importance. You are not ignoring the issue. You are preventing the issue from being shaped entirely by the person who introduced it. You are not suppressing your response. You are choosing the conditions in which your response can remain yours. Most people mistake speed for confidence. The few understand that composure makes speed unnecessary. A reaction can be demanded. A decision must be chosen. Number 3. You listen for the gap between what people say and what they consistently do. Words matter, but words are also the cheapest form of presentation. Anyone can promise patience, loyalty, respect, or change when the promise costs nothing. Conduct becomes more revealing when the mood shifts, when approval disappears, or when there is no reward for appearing decent. The mechanism behind this is not mysterious. People build a public version of themselves, then protect it through language. But maintaining an image across every situation requires effort. Fatigue, disappointment, envy, and convenience create small leaks. A person may praise cooperation while taking credit, speak about honesty while hiding simple facts, or claim to value your boundaries while repeatedly testing them. Look for the cost of the behavior. A promise made during an emotional conversation may feel meaningful, but a pattern maintained during inconvenience carries more evidence. An apology that changes nothing is not the same as an apology followed by repair. A generous gesture in public is not equal to quiet reliability when nobody is watching. This does not require constant suspicion. It requires a longer memory than the moment. Keep track of what happens after the explanation, after the apology, after the impressive declaration. Does the behavior become more consistent, or does a new explanation appear to protect the old pattern? The answer does not need to be spoken aloud to be useful. It isn't cynical to compare statements with patterns. It is how you keep your judgment attached to reality. Cynicism says nobody can be trusted. Clarity says trust should be proportionate to evidence. Machiavelli advised rulers to study what people do when interest and appearance separate. You can apply that lesson without turning every relationship into an investigation. Notice who keeps agreements when nobody is watching. Notice who apologizes without adding an excuse. Notice who treats people well, even when those people have nothing to offer. Pay attention to the moment a person describes themselves most proudly. What behavior follows when their identity is questioned? What happens when they lose control of the outcome? Do their actions confirm their language, or does their language serve as camouflage for their actions? You can also study the pattern in yourself without turning the lesson into self-accusation. Where do you accept an explanation because it is pleasant even when the repeated conduct says something else? Where do you demand proof from one person while granting endless exceptions to another? Accurate judgment is not only about detecting inconsistency around you. It is about noticing where your own preferences distort the evidence. You do not need to confront every contradiction. You do not need to expose every false promise. Sometimes the most intelligent response is a quiet adjustment of access, less explanation, fewer assumptions, a more accurate distance. The loudest claim is not always the strongest evidence. A disciplined mind lets repetition speak. Number 4. You keep your plans quiet until they have enough structure to survive other people's opinions. There is a difference between privacy and secrecy. Secrecy hides harm. Privacy protects development. When an intention is still fragile, exposing it to every opinion can make you confuse discussion with progress. You begin defending the idea before you have tested it. You collect approval instead of building capacity. The mind is vulnerable to premature recognition. Once a goal is announced, the praise attached to the announcement can feel like a portion of the achievement. That feeling is comforting, but it can reduce the pressure to complete the work. Other people may also place their fears, preferences, and limitations onto your plan, not because they are always malicious, but because they can only judge what fits their own experience. A developing plan needs friction, but not every kind of friction. Honest criticism tests structure. Casual doubt often tests your willingness to abandon yourself. Learn the difference. Ask whether the person offering an opinion understands the task, has observed the work, and is willing to help you examine a weakness. If not, their reaction may be information about their perspective rather than a verdict on your direction. It isn't that nobody deserves to know what you are doing. It is that not everybody deserves access to what is still forming. You can share selectively with people who offer honest questions rather than emotional weather. Machiavelli repeatedly valued concealed intention because visible intention invites resistance before action is ready. In your life, this does not mean deceiving people. It means allowing preparation to remain preparation. You do not owe a public announcement for every private decision. Watch how your energy changes when you stop explaining the next move. Do you work more steadily? Do you notice which people support your direction and which people only support the version of you they can predict? Do you find yourself tempted to reveal the plan just to receive reassurance? The test is simple. After sharing the plan, are you clearer or merely more exposed? Did the conversation improve the work, or did it create a new audience whose approval must now be maintained? If you discover that explanation has replaced execution, return to the quiet stage. Build the outline. Test the assumption. Let the unfinished thing remain unfinished in public. Let results speak after effort has earned them. If a decision affects others, communicate what they need to know. If it concerns your own growth, protect the early stage from unnecessary interference. You could be open-hearted without being permanently available for inspection. Most people reveal their plans to feel powerful for a moment. A formidable mind keeps its power in the work. What stays unannounced can become well prepared. Number 5. You leave quietly when a conversation, relationship, or environment repeatedly demands that you betray your own clarity. Silence is not only what you withhold, it is also what you stop participating in. A person with a watchful mind eventually notices the cost of remaining in places where every boundary becomes a debate, every success becomes a threat, and every honest statement is converted into an argument. The mechanism is gradual normalization. The mind adapts to repeated pressure and begins calling exhaustion normal. You explain yourself more carefully. You choose smaller words. You anticipate moods before speaking. Over time, you may believe the problem is your delivery, your sensitivity, or your inability to keep the peace. But sometimes the environment benefits from your confusion. One warning sign is the shrinking of your private judgment. You know what happened, but you spend so much time preparing to defend your perception that the original event becomes secondary. You know what you need, but the anticipated reaction makes the need feel unreasonable. You know a pattern is repeating, but each individual incident is presented as too small to justify concern. This is how clarity gets worn down without one dramatic moment. It isn't always wise to make a dramatic exit. Drama can give a dysfunctional situation one final opportunity to pull you back into performance. Quiet distance often reveals more than a final speech. When access is reduced, patterns become visible. The person who respected you may respect the boundary. The person who relied on your constant availability may punish you for creating one. Machiavelli recognized that a position becomes weak when it depends on pleasing every faction at once. Your life becomes unstable when your peace depends on satisfying every demand around you. A boundary is not a threat. It is information about what participation requires. Notice the moments when you feel compelled to over-explain a simple no. Notice when someone treats your calm withdrawal as an insult because they expected a fight. Notice when your absence brings relief rather than regret. What would become possible if you stopped trying to make an unhealthy arrangement feel reasonable? Leaving does not always mean disappearing. It can mean ending the argument, reducing contact, changing the subject, declining the invitation, or no longer offering the private information that keeps a harmful dynamic supplied. The action can be quiet and still be firm. You do not have to convince someone that your boundary is legitimate before you enforce it. You stop arguing with every distortion. You stop negotiating against your own needs. You stop confusing access with affection. The few do not leave to punish. They leave to preserve judgment. Your silence becomes protective when it no longer asks permission to recognize what is harming you. Number 6. You become difficult to move because your identity is no longer built from other people's reactions. This is the final habit, and it is where silence becomes more than a technique. You no longer stay quiet merely to gather information. You become quiet because you have stopped needing every person to confirm who you are. Praise does not rush you forward. Criticism does not automatically turn you around. Suspicion does not automatically turn you around. Suspicion does not force you into a performance of innocence. The mechanism is internal stability. When identity depends on reflection from other people, every room becomes a test. You adjust your voice to the strongest personality. You change your standards to preserve approval. You reveal more than necessary because being misunderstood feels unbearable. That is not openness. It is dependence disguised as transparency. A stable identity does not mean stubbornness. It means your principles can absorb information without being replaced by every new opinion. You can admit an error without collapsing into shame. You can accept useful criticism without surrendering your entire direction. You can revise a decision because the evidence changed, not because someone applied enough pressure. It isn't that you become unreadable by hiding your humanity. You become unreadable when your choices are governed by principles rather than pressure. People cannot easily move someone who does not need to win every interpretation of them. Machiavelli saw that the strongest position is not always the most visible one. Sometimes it belongs to the person whose motives are not available for casual use, whose patience cannot be purchased by flattery, and whose fear cannot be activated by every threat. Your aim is not to make others anxious. Your aim is to make your own judgment reliable. Ask yourself, what would remain if nobody applauded this decision? What would you refuse even if refusal made you unpopular? Which parts of your character stay intact when the room misunderstands you? Watch your relationship with explanation. Explain what responsibility requires. Clarify what protects a meaningful relationship, but do not turn your entire life into a courtroom where every observer receives evidence and a vote. You are not required to answer every accusation. You are not required to correct every impression. You are not required to offer your private reasoning to people who have shown no care with it. Sometimes restraint is not a wall around your character. It is the boundary that lets your character remain coherent. A dangerous mind, in the healthy sense, is not cruel or chaotic. It is dangerous to confusion, dangerous to coercion, dangerous to the habits that once made you easy to steer. You do not need to dominate a room when you can govern yourself inside it. You stop chasing recognition. You stop answering every challenge. You stop giving strangers the authority to define your direction. That is the identity silence builds. A person who sees deeply, acts deliberately, and cannot be moved by a pressure that has not earned influence. Remember what you saw today. You let the room reveal itself before judging it. You delayed reaction so pressure could not choose for you. You compared words with patterns. You protected unfinished plans from unnecessary opinion. You left environments that demanded self-betrayal. You built an identity that does not depend on reaction. These habits are not a costume of mystery. They are forms of self-command. The goal is not to become cold or suspicious. It is to become clear. This is about recognizing pressure, performance, and concealed leverage when they are used on you, not using them on anyone. You do not need to search for enemies in every silence. You need to become accurate enough to distinguish discomfort from danger, feedback from control, and privacy from isolation. The most watchful mind is not the one that distrusts everyone. It is the one that gives trusts everyone. It is the one that gives trust carefully, adjusts without panic, and keeps compassion without surrendering judgment. You observe without absorbing. You pause without freezing. You listen without volunteering your entire inner world. You act without needing an audience to understand the reason. Most people want silence to make them look powerful. The few use it to remain honest with themselves. That is why your quiet becomes formidable. It is no longer an absence of speech, but the presence of choice. Remember the words you wrote at the beginning, "I let silence reveal patterns." Let that sentence guide your attention, not harden your heart. Every quiet moment can become a chance to see more clearly before you decide what deserves your energy. And while you are there with that reminder, the pinned comment holds virtual the Machiavelli doctrine, a complete system for forging a mind no one can easily read or move, while helping you recognize the difference between your own discipline and the influence of the people around you. If this sharpens something in you, subscribe. The next lesson goes deeper. A quiet mind is a locked door with the light still on.